Hello, I'm Sara Angelucci, and this is my exhibition Nocturnal Botanical at the Stephen Bulger Gallery. I began this series around 2018, experimenting with scanning plants in my garden. At the time, I really wasn't trying to make any kind of an art project. My sister had recently passed away. It was a very difficult time for me, and retreating to my garden was a place of solace. Working there was just very healing. So I gave myself a small project of just gathering specimens in my garden. I spent the summer doing it and scanning them just as a way of identifying the plants and getting to know what was there. And then as time went on, I started to think about scanning in the winter. I went to Allen Gardens and scanned in the greenhouses. And it was a very difficult environment to work in because the light was too strong for the scanner. So that led me to wanting to work where there was an absence of light at night, and also going to where the plants actually grow. Rather than working in an artificial environment, I thought, what would it be like to go where the plants are and to see what grows together in different environments. So during COVID, I had time to spend in the countryside near my cottage. I explored all the terrain around our property, primarily tethered to the house through a long extension cord, tethered to the scanner and my computer where I could work. During the daytime, I would go out and scout locations, discover plants, watch them changing over the seasons. For example, in the summertime, you can see the exquisite milkweed in blossom, making these tiny pink blossoms, which are so extraordinary. And then in the fall, they turn into these incredible pods, which release these floating seeds, and they look entirely different. So I became really fascinated not just with the blooming flowers, but with how plants transform themselves from the spring season to the late fall season and the seeds that they produce. The other element that became really interesting for me was to want to explore beyond our own property and to go beyond 150 feet. So I began to explore rivers and ponds, and to do that, I needed to be untethered. So I bought a generator and started to move around the valley, visit other kinds of ecological systems. And so, for example, you'll see now in the exhibition the cardinal flower, which is a native plant growing with Joe Pye weed and mint, which are all plants that love wet feet. They love to grow near water. So that's something I'm still experimenting and exploring, and why this work is ongoing, because I'm still discovering new plants in different areas around southern Ontario. What grew out of this project was the idea that plants that we encounter on a daily basis, some of them are not native, of course, and I started to ask myself, how did they get here? Why are they here? Some were purposely brought over by settlers at the turn of the century or earlier, and have become naturalized. And for example, Queen Anne's lace, which we see everywhere, is not a native plant. And so I began to think about this idea that settlers brought plants with them, both for useful purposes, sometimes as medicinal plants, and other times as decorative plants, and then those plants escaped. And so I started to think about my own family migrating to Canada in the 1950s, and the fact that they were farmers and my grandparents were farmers and my great-great-grandparents were farmers, and to think about their reliance on plants for food, but also for medicine and for spiritual rituals sometimes as well. So I decided to go back to Italy and visit my family village on the Adriatic coast. In the middle of the country, it's a small village called Montottone. It goes back to the 11th century, and my family has been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so visiting this area, I began to work with a local botanist and discover plants that are wild in the region, but also, again, invasive and introduced species in Italy as well. One thing I discovered that was quite surprising to me was that Italy is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world, and in fact they have over 100 native orchids. Something I'd also like to point out are the insects which appear in the photographs, which I love. I have no control over them, of course, It's a sort of gift to me when they decide to participate in one of the images. So one of my favorites is the moth. This one is a scattering of seeds and plants. At the end of the evening, often I have a lot of plant matter that's sort of gathered around me, and I do these random compositions where I just throw everything on the scanner bed and hope for the best. And in this particular image, the moth decided to land on the scanner bed, and I didn't even see it happening because I had a flashlight and I was standing up and looking around. So it wasn't until the next day that I discovered that this moth had landed and been documented by the scanner, and I was just so thrilled. You can see from the little light streaks that happen through the image that the moth was moving and left these notations on the surface. In Italy, I've included a snail because they're everywhere, they're invasive species. And so I picked up a snail and put it on the scanner bed, and he slimed his way across the screen, which was wonderful. And in fact, that image was actually on my great-grandparents' land. So it's very meaningful to me. One of the things I love discovering are the vernacular names that people have for plants. And so this one in Italian is called La Principessa Spettinata, which for anyone who speaks Italian will know what that means, but for those who don't, it means the princess with the messy hair. One of the things I wanted to share with the audience is that all the plants that are in an image are plants which grow together. So they're sometimes companion plants, sometimes they're competing with one another for territory. In the case of this one, it's the title image for the series in Italy, Bella di Notte, which means beautiful at night. And it's because this pink flower is a night blooming plant. These two plants were put together because the caperberry flower grows literally out of the cracks in the walls of the village, and the Bella di Notte plant grows at the foot of the wall. So they're sort of keeping each other company, hugging the wall, if you will. And it's interesting to me how people don't really even notice plants. For example, when I brought this image home and I was showing my cousins, they said to me, "Where did you find that?" And I said, 10 meters from your house. So it's really interesting that we pass these plants every day, and the more that we see them, the less we actually notice them. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll get to see the exhibition. It'll be here until the 15th of June.